I would like to begin by welcoming all of you here today to Temple Isaiah of Stony Brook as we honor the life of the brilliant and kind soul of Alfred Scharf Goldhaber. I'm Rabbi Joshua Gray, and I ask at this time that we all be fully present here in this space for our mourners today, and for Fred's neshama, his soul, and that we silence or turn off any cell phones or electronic devices at this time. We begin with a song, a portion of Psalm 121, and I was personally fortunate enough to see Fred during his final hours on this physical plane and sing with him and some of his family members this version of Esa Einai. When we miss Fred, when we feel the darkness and the pain of loss, perhaps we can listen and remember the words of Psalm 121. We can lift our eyes up to the mountains, and our help can come from God, God who gives us strength. Esa Einai el Harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa Einai el Harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. To read from Psalm 23, I would like to invite up to the bima Rabbi Adam Fisher.
This psalm speaks to the journey that Fred has been on and his family is now on. A psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me to waters in places of repose. God renews my life. God guides me in the right paths as befits God's nature. Though I walk in the valley of deep darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread your table before me in full view of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai many long years.
Thank you, Rabbi Fisher. I'm Rabbi Ilana Goldhaber Gordon, but I was Ilana Goldhaber Gordon many years before I was Rabbi anything. I'm David's wife and Fred's daughter-in-law. The heart of the essence of a Jewish funeral, and I suspect of all mourning practices in every culture is the telling the story of the person we lost. I have to tell you, I've said those words, those exact words, countless times as the rabbi for people I care about very much, people in my community back in California. And I think I never really understood them until right now. This is the first time that I'm here to help us mourn someone that I loved in a much more personal way. But it is really powerful, this telling of story. And our tradition holds that when people's bodies leave thus, they themselves do not. They continue to live. And I believe that it's in this storytelling that it's through that storytelling that we brighten their souls. In fact, that's exactly the language of our tradition, that by the storytelling we kind of fan the flames of their souls until the light continues to live on forever, or at least as long as we're here to remember them. And Fred's light will be shining very, very bright. So your job today is to remember your stories of Fred, and your job in the coming weeks is to share them with our family. And your job right now is to hear the stories that the family has to share, so that the stories that we share will add to the stories you're carrying, so that together, the light of Fred's, together, all of us together will be keeping alive the light of Fred's soul through those stories. So I will ask first his daughter, my sister-in-law, Sarah Goldhaber Fiebert, to share some thoughts.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to cry, fair warning. As so many of you have mentioned to us already, Fred, or Papa as I refer to him, was a wise and kind, gentle human being. He quietly inspired, he led as a role model, and was beloved by so many. Some of my earliest childhood memories are of Papa reading to me, hiking and walking together hand in hand, traveling and waking me up most mornings. He was so gentle waking me up that when I was a teenager, he sometimes came back 3 or 4 times before I actually got out of bed. For more than half a century, Papa also meditated almost every morning, as I have started to do in recent years myself. We knew that was his quiet time, though if someone really needed him, he would help and then calmly return to his meditation, unflustered. Papa was a discerning filter for all the best parts of everyone's humanity. His filter caught the good parts in all of us, in everyone he met, and in life. Then he let anything else flow by calmly, rarely becoming visibly frustrated by it. I wanted to tell you a little bit about his parenting to share with you. It was only when Jeremy, my husband, and I had our own children, Eitan and Miriam, that I fully came to realize Papa's parenting values, which I have tried to emulate the best I can. Papa thought of parenting like helping plants to thrive. When I became an Ima and asked him explicitly about what guided his decisions, he described his role as enabling David and me and Sunvu when she joined our family to each fully become ourselves. Along with Mama, Papa metaphorically provided the nutrient-rich soil, the water, and the sunlight. Then they let us pursue our passions without preconceived notions for what kind of plants we became, and they encouraged us in all of it. Grandpa as the next generation calls him, continued the same nurturing approach to connect deeply with all 5 of his grandchildren, who were each beloved to him: Zev, Shira, Eitan, Miriam, and Yara. Grandpa loves you so much. Papa appreciated his many blessings in a life full of so many, and he also approached life's challenges with humor and with grace. As some of you know, towards the end of his life, he faced multiple health challenges, both physical and substantial short-term memory loss. We were all blessed that he retained his core personality and connections with loved ones. He knew all of us with no problem, enjoying the gift of extra time together, even over these past months, with simple pleasures of being together, smiling, holding hands, hugs, talking, and reading together. And I'm so grateful for that extra time. Mama told a story that encapsulates Papa's graceful approach. Some months ago, a well-meaning friend asked how Fred was doing cognitively while he was nearby in his wheelchair. Mama kindly thought to wheel Papa a good distance away before answering, "He's not in La La Land." What she forgot is that his hearing was exquisite. Without missing a beat, he added with his typical kind humor, "That's right, I'm just in La Land." Esa Enai, the psalm that you all joined us in singing with Rabbi Josh earlier, was a meaningful song and poem that Papa loved singing together on many wonderful occasions. As he was dying earlier this week, it was also a privilege for me and for David and for Mama to all be together with Papa and to be able to sing Esa Enai to him as we held him. He had a great life and he had a good death. Thank you all.
Fred's son, David, my husband, will come up now.
I'm blessed to have had 2 parents who loved me unconditionally, granted me their very different gifts, and I've had a generous time with them. Not enough, never enough, but more than anyone deserves or has a right to expect. And even their grandkids have gotten to know them. Sarah spoke beautifully about Papa Fred's philosophy of child rearing, and Rabbi Ilana spoke of how people live on in our stories and in how they've shaped us. My father was a wonder to me, and an inspiration, and an enigma. He in ways that I didn't always know or interrogate at the time, he shaped who I am as a guide to young people as they grow into themselves as scientists and people, and as a scientific thinker myself. In some ways, he was a hard act to follow. My parents never pushed me into one direction or another. But I grew up surrounded by physics and grew to love its ideas and language. And even as I proceeded to my PhD in physics, I didn't really believe that I could be an academic scientist myself, because I saw my father and I knew that I could never be him. I could never have his mastery over mathematics and his deep insights. And it took me a while to realize, with good fortune and good mentorship, and to realize that I could be the best version of myself. And I was privileged to be able to talk about the ideas that I was passionate about with my grandparents, Fred's parents, and then that was near the ends of their lives, but with my father, to have him share in my appreciation for ideas, and to always be caring about me, and also caring about truth and beauty. And I'll say something that may come up later too, but I feel, I said he's an enigma. In some ways, Fred was too good for this world. I mean, he was privileged. We were privileged that he had a setting, scaffolded by my mother Susan, scaffolded by the Young Institute for Theoretical Physics, where he could be his best self without fighting for himself, without having to exert ego. And I've known very few people in this world who perform at anything at such a high level without, at some level, pushing their regard of themselves onto the world. And sometimes it's hard to be able to do those things, to be given the place to do it without taking up space in that way. And he did, and he serves as a model for me in ways I've realized, in ways I probably have not yet realized, in how I go about my life as a person, a guide, and what I take as important. Thank you.
Eitan Goldhaber Fiebert, Fred's grandson, is going to say a few words.
Hi, I'm Eitan Goldhaber Fiebert, grandson of Fred, or Grandpa. as I knew him. My grandpa was a loving and kind person. He frequently called and reached out to us grandchildren and was genuinely interested in what was going on with our lives. He asked about the classes we were taking in school, particularly anything physics related, of course, and what we had done with our friends that weekend. One thing I loved about Grandpa was his amazing warmth, which he shared through his loving hugs. His hugs made me feel warm inside. Always made me feel very supported and loved. I'm very sad Grandpa is physically gone from this world, but I know his loving spirit lives on in all of us. Thank you.
Fred's younger brother, Michael, just 2 years younger than him, is in California. I hope he's watching on the live stream right now. Michael said to me that when they were little, people used to think of them, Michael and Freddie, as two peas in a pod. And they had a very close relationship in the first quarter century of their life and continue that relationship throughout their lives. Michael wrote some memories, and my son, Zev Goldhaber Gordon, Fred's grandson, will share Michael's memories on his behalf.
Fred, from my earliest knowledge, there you were, protector, brother, companion, playmate, teacher, nemesis, foil, fierce, unyielding competitor. As our parents were busy with their careers in a time when the available child care in World War II Illinois was hardly existent and totally untutored, we were often vital companions to each other. Even with our parents around, you had learned to say genug Deutsch as they spoke the enemy tongue out of habit. Then, with Germany conquered, we were on vacation in upper Wisconsin somewhere, and you, age barely 5, had to sound the alarm as soldiers came marching from the German prisoner of war camp that turned out to be the nearest neighbor of our rented bungalow. The marchers were American, fortunately. Only a little later, we were sitting on porch steps, and you were teaching me to read, or so we both thought. Our mother tried reluctantly to enroll us in Hebrew school, but you seemingly convinced the rabbi that the only language worth knowing was English. The piano teacher our parents hired for you soon fired you for asking too many questions. Time passed, we moved to Bayport, and you played Columbus in the 5th grade play. In the Code of the Manhattan Project, the Italian navigator wasn't Columbus, but Enrico Fermi. He came to our house when you were 14, and the two of you played ping pong, arguing intensely over every point scored. In high school, you developed the ambition to be a politician, and our mother took you to meet one. He advised law school. When you went to Harvard, some advisor there assured you that physics was an excellent prelude to studying law. The political world is still reeling. After my first year at Harvard, we took a student-run charter flight to Europe. We spent a month together at a hotel in the French Alps, both eavesdropping to our amusement on some other Harvard students speaking too loud English. Then we stopped in at Strasbourg, where I had written to a physicist I had guided around the grounds of Brookhaven. He turned out not to be there, and his subordinates took us to be our father and uncle, respectively. They took us to their lab and spent a long afternoon unintelligibly explaining their work, you nodding sagely the whole time. They were totally taken in. He probably would have been a superb politician. When you graduated, our parents were on a Scandinavian lecture tour, so I had to be your local apprentice as you stood at the front of the entire group of gowned figures to receive your diploma in physics summa cum laude. I will certainly miss the talks we had so many times on long walks. The last one, I remember you were walking much too fast for me. And now you are gone, summa cum laude.
Some of you may be familiar with a book called Pirkei Avot. In English, The Ethics of the Fathers. It's a collection of Jewish wisdom statements from the 2nd century. And in it is a set of 4 teachings by a scholar named Ben Zoma. These are 1,800-year-old teachings that seem like they could have been written for my father-in-law, Fred Goldhaber. Each of Ben Zoma's teachings starts with a short question. Fred also liked to teach by asking questions. Who is wise? Who is mighty? Who is wealthy? Who is honored? Let's start with who is wise, because, as Sarah said, that's the first adjective that comes to mind for many of us when we describe Fred. Also, that's where Ben Zoma started. Fred was sharp. But more importantly, he delighted in the beauty of ideas. He was full of his own questions. When he was young, as Michael shared, those questions could be overwhelming. But by the time I came into his life, Fred had long ago learned to be patient in the search for answers. He spent over 30 decades courting the magnetic monopole, a phenomenon so elusive that David once wrote a poem comparing it to a unicorn. I always thought the topics of Fred's research felt romantic. He had a gift for presenting complex ideas with elegant clarity. He was also a keen observer of the world of human interactions. He would often write long, well-thought-out letters to newspapers and politicians, and we all had the sense that this world would have been much better off if only more of them had listened to him. Surely, Fred's love of ideas, certainly his love of physics, was in part an inheritance from his parents. Trudy and Maurice Goldhaber are among the great names of physics. And as an adult, Fred was proud to have been able to collaborate with them as an equal on several projects. He and Trudy produced the first ever mother-son publication in physics research. But who is wise according to Ben Zoma? Not the person who has the impressive publications list, although Fred had that. Not the person who has the prestigious professorship, although Fred had that too. Who is wise? Ben Zoma said, the one who learns from all people. And in that, Fred far surpassed the previous generation. The grandchildren remember Fred's love of building the structures with them on those wooden marble tracks. Sarah and Susan remember that Fred was interested in everyone's viewpoint, oblivious to their role or rank. For example, he would often engage the woman who cleaned their house in these long conversations until Susan would scold him for distracting her from her work. Who is mighty? Benzoma asked. Looking at Fred's slight figure, you might think that question didn't apply. But Fred was a mighty hiker and backpacker and snowshoer. He chose to walk 2.5 miles to work every day and then to climb up 6 flights of stairs to his office. He would compose entire lectures on those walks. In truth, Fred was also a worrier and not that sure on his feet. I remember once on a hike in the Sierras, we came to a tight spot that required a scramble over some rocks. Susan walked across it nimbly, while Fred and I both hung back a little nervously. I watched my mother-in-law a little enviously and said to Fred, "She's really good at that." He said, "Yes, she is. She's really good at a lot of things." Despite his preference for solid ground under his feet, in 2008, Fred fell and fractured his neck. He had to wear this device called a halo brace day and night for months. It was like this metal torture contraction that was literally screwed into his skull to keep it in place. And not once did any of us hear him complain. Fred was mighty, though Benzoma's answer to the question has nothing to do with physical endurance. Who is mighty? Says Benzoma, the one who conquers his bad inclinations. Well, if Fred had any bad inclinations, he seemed to have had them fully conquered. I never heard him speak badly of anyone. In the 30-plus years that I knew him, I can only once remember seeing him lose his temper, and even that was just for a moment. He was incapable of lying. Sarah and Jeremy and their kids tried to play games of truth, 2 truths and a lie with him. When it was Fred's turn, he would always start with his 2 truthful statements. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to mix them up so you can guess. But he would start with the truthful ones, and then his face would turn bright red, and he would make up a lie so outrageously absurd, like, "I swam with dolphins yesterday," that there was no need to guess which statement was the falsehood. He was deeply patient, never hurried. In fact, I think he was incapable of hurrying. Sarah remembers Fred going to all her soccer games when she was a girl. But what really stood out is that he brought her rabbit Sooty on a leash. Now, taking Sooty out of the house was a huge hassle to everyone else. Fred was happy to do it because it made Sarah happy. Who is honored? Benzoma asked. The one who honors all people. I don't need to tell you how well that applied to Fred. He never chased honors or awards for himself. As David said, he seemed devoid of ego. He was constantly, though, nominating other people for awards, especially students and young people. And he would spend a credible amount of time working on every letter of recommendation. He just really enjoyed helping other people succeed. But that doesn't mean coddling them. When Sarah would ask him for help with her math homework, he would drop everything to come to her, but he would never give her the answers. Instead, he would ask her more questions, pushing her to understand the concepts behind the problems. When David took an interest in chess, Fred became his regular partner, competitor, and Fred never let David win. For years, David lost to Fred. Then he began to draw. And then one great day, when David was 12 years old, he beat his father, at which point There was no longer any purpose in their playing together. Fred seemed impervious to the fashions and glories and social norms that drive so many of us. When he and Susan were dating, he used to travel between New York and Boston with all of his stuff in paper shopping bags. To quote the theme of the 70th birthday party Susan threw for him, "Hats off to Fred." Which brings us to the fourth of Ben Zoma's questions. Who is wealthy? The one who is happy with his lot. Fred found happiness in all the blessings life gave him. Eitan reminded us last night how much Grandpa Fred loved those hugs that made you feel so good inside. And I thank you for reminding us that when we would hug him, he would give this sweet little sound. Zev reminded us of the twinkle in Fred's eye when he did that banana trick, snapping the inside, the fruit, without breaking the peel. In Susan's words, Fred always looked on the bright side of everything. I don't think he was capable of seeing the negative, she said. Before Susan met Fred, she was best friends with Annette Sampton, later to become Annette Marcus. Susan was at Harvard studying to be a teacher, and Annette invited her out to California for a vacation. They rented a car and drove up the coast together, ending at Berkeley, where Annette's cousin, a guy named Fred Goldhaber, was working as a postdoc. Fred took him on a grand tour of the area over all 3 bridges, ending the day at Muir Woods, so he could check in on his girlfriend. He was camping there. Too bad, Susan thought. She also met Michael for the first time on that trip. He was out at Stanford working on his PhD. But then Fred moved back east to take the job at Stony Brook, and Susan met him again at Annette's end-of-year party. And after that meeting, Fred went back to California and broke up with his girlfriend. And then he started coming out to Cambridge, ostensibly for a research project. Susan had the feeling that she was the real project. About a year later, Fred asked Susan, "Where would you prefer I spend the summer?" To which she replied, "I don't care where you spend the summer unless we're together." "Would you come with me?" "Only if we had some sort of commitment." "Well, I guess we will have to get married then." And they did. And they had 55 years together, and 2 beautiful children, and 5 beautiful grandchildren, and years of immense Ben Zoma-style wealth. Their home was always open to guests, students and visiting scientists and friends, new and old, for they had both the art of holding on to old friends and the art of making new ones. The friendship with Ilyan and her family spans 3 generations. Sunvu, Sarah's pen pal, came to live with the family for a year of high school, and Fred and Susan became her second parents. Every summer, the family drove out to Los Alamos, and they made lifelong friends in New Mexico. And now in this final chapter, Fred and Susan found both old and new friends here at Jefferson's Ferry and are surrounded by the warmth of community. And even as Fred's health declined, still he remained happy. He was grateful to the staff of Beauvais, who cared for him so compassionately. He was grateful to Kevin, who was a caregiver and a buddy, and matched Fred's upbeat spirit. But above all, he and we are grateful to Susan, who was his devoted partner and greatest advocate every step of the way. In Susan's words, Fred was all I ever dreamed of in a partner. If wealth is measured, as Benzoma said, by one's happiness with one's lot, then Fred Goldhaber was the wealthiest man alive. He left us peacefully with Susan, David, and Sarah by his side. May we all be blessed to learn from his example and find happiness in each day given to us. His memory will be a blessing. Now I will ask Rabbi Josh to join me on the bima, and he will recite in Hebrew and I will recite in English the traditional memorial prayer, asking God to hold Fred's soul. Please rise, whether in body or in spirit.
El male rachamim, shochen b'amromim, hametzeh menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashechina, b'malot kedoshim u'thorim, ki zohar harakia mazhirim, et nishmat Avraham ben Moshe geula shehalach le'olamo, b'gan eden tahei manuchato. Ana bar rachamim, yasirehu beseiter knafav l'olamim, v'yitzror b'tzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar amen.
Dear compassionate God, in your mercy, take the soul of Alfred Scharf Goldhaber under your protective wing. May his memory shine bright as the brightest stars in the sky. May he live on within each and every one of us. May his soul be protected. May he be bound up eternally in the bonds of life. And let us say, Amen.